Peace be upon you. We are back, dear viewers, to resume the journey of certainty. The next stage in our journey is a discussion on the origin of man. Is it evolution, development, or direct creation? However, before we start, let's take a quick tour through previous episodes which summarize some important concepts as a beneficial review for our followers and those who have recently joined us on the journey of certainty. These concepts will help you gain an in-depth understanding of the relationship between knowledge, science, faith, and the unseen, and answer some troubling questions that many people struggle with. We will publish these concentrated episodes in sequence, then apply them to human origin as a case study, if Allah wills. In today's episode, we will discuss the popular expression, "Do not mix faith with science." Faith is belief in the unseen, things outside the sphere of observation, while science is based on material disciplines. Let us discuss these terms. Is science purely materialistic, not to be confused with faith? In today's episode, we will outline the relationship between belief in a creator, materialism, and science. Let us first define some terms. Belief in a creator is the belief that there is a creator who created the universe and life. Materialism means excluding the unseen, i.e., anything outside the materialistic framework, including the existence of a creator, is excluded completely from the study of the universe and life. Science means experimental observational science. We will not refer to science as ilm, knowledge, because we will prove that science it is not the only form of knowledge. Ilm is the totality of knowledge, with science as one of its forms. Science includes inventions and useful discoveries for mankind in the areas of health, communication, transportation, construction, etc. Let's see what science is based upon. Then check if these basics exist in the system of belief in a creator, or in materialism, in order to evaluate the accuracy of the above-mentioned terms. First, there is no doubt that science relies on the mind to analyze information, make inductions, reach deductions, and formulate hypotheses. The mind evaluates the truth or falsehood of things. Second, science depends on basic axioms, which no rational person can deny. The mind uses these basic axioms to link observations, make inductions, and draw conclusions. That is why they are also called necessary truths or logical basics. Like what? Like the causality principle. Every emergent thing has a cause. In other words, everything which begins to exist after non-existence must have a cause. Whenever you see the word why in science, you are searching for a cause. Why did this happen? The word mechanism is a description of the cause. For example, in my field of pharmacology, whenever we research the uses for a particular drug, we study the cases where this medicine was a cause for the cure from a particular disease. How does this drug work? What is the mechanism? Here we examine how this medication caused the recovery, why it produces certain side effects, and look for a way, cause, to avoid these symptoms. Why do some drugs interact with others? Here, we are looking for the mechanism, i.e., the cause for this drug interaction. Science in general is a search for causal relationships. We start from an a priori basic axiom that every emergent thing in this universe must have a cause. We laugh if anyone answers any of the above questions with, "It just happened, no reason." We are certain that there is a cause, and we strive to discover it. Third, science depends on accumulated knowledge, i.e., the results of past research and discoveries, the testimony of previous researchers. The researcher cannot reinvent the wheel every time and start from scratch. He does not have to rediscover what was already discovered. Instead, he builds upon testimony from previous research results after applying the necessary authentication mechanisms to verify the accuracy of the testimony, the results, and that they are reproducible. Every new scientific research must go through the literature review phase to examine the previous findings of science in that area, i.e., the testimony of previous researchers. The researcher uses it as a foundation and builds upon it. He may highlight some missing aspects in past research, which the new research will address, to enhance the knowledge structure in that area. Fourth, science is based on observation, which provides input into this epistemic system. We may observe things directly, or through their effects. Observations, the mind, and basic axioms all interact to deduce the existence of things, which are not directly observable, from their effects. Question: Is there any rational objection to what we have mentioned so far? Does any rational person deny that science relies on these four things? Then, let's call them the sources of science. The mind, basic axioms, such as causality, testimony, meaning previous research, and observation, directly or through the effects. Experimental science results from the interaction of these four elements. Now, do these four sources for science exist in the system of belief in a creator or in materialism? Let's take a look. First, with regard to the mind, belief in a creator means that the universe, life, and man are created by a creator with perfect attributes through his absolute knowledge and wisdom, who endowed man with a trustworthy mind, equipped to discover truth. This mind can be relied on to analyze data, reach deductions, and judge the truth or falsehood of information. Such a mind is capable of producing science. On the other hand, materialism rejects this premise, that the universe, life, and man are created by a creator, and assumes that the universe, man, and life came by chance, as we see in this paper on the history of Western science titled The Assumptions of Western Science as it Developed Historically, which lists, among its assumptions, that the material universe is accidentally assembled from the smallest physical units into larger structures and interactive patterns. So, in materialism, the mind and cognitive facilities emerged by chance. And the human mind is a product of chance, not intention or design. How can I trust a mind that emerged by accident to lead me to the truth? How can I trust its deductions, analytic abilities, and understanding if it came by chance and was not built for discovering the truth? Not only that, but this mind wasn't even designed or intentionally created. This question is sufficient to prove the complete disconnection between materialism and science. Let me stress this point, as it suffices to prove the absurdity of materialism. You might be surprised to know that Darwin himself challenged the credibility of the mind when he wrote to William Graham, "But then with me, the horrid doubt always arises, whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy." And you will find similar statements in the appendix of his book On the Origin of Species, the Broadview Press edition, where he doubts the credibility of a human mind developed from the mind of the lowest animal. When you hear such statements from Darwin, you might think that he was being honest, openly sharing his confusion in order to arrive at the truth. However, Darwin used these statements to deny a creator for the universe and life. According to him, the human mind, in observing the universe and its creatures, cannot grasp that it came by randomly, without a creator. But then he goes on to say, would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions in such a mind? Okay, Darwin, why do you doubt the credibility of the mind only when it points to a creator? Why don't you doubt it when it produces your scenarios of blind random evolution? If your mind is not credible, then nothing it produces is credible. You cannot believe your mind in one thing, then deny it in another. Someone might say, why should I care about Darwin or his ancient words? He has been dead for more than 150 years. What if I told you that many of today's leading materialists say the same thing? The mind cannot be trusted to reach any truth. I will provide you with documented clips from Dr. Sami Alameri's lecture, Darwinism, an argument for atheism or against it.
Have you heard of Francis Crick, the very famous biologist, atheist, and Nobel laureate? He is a militant atheist. In his book, The Astonishing Hypothesis, he literally says, "Our highly developed brains, after all, were not evolved under the pressure of discovering scientific truths, but only to enable us to be clever enough to survive."
Let's see what contemporary materialistic scientists say.
The philosopher John Gray says, "But if Darwin's theory of natural selection is true, the human mind serves evolutionary success, not truth."
Similarly, Steven Pinker, the atheist psychologist, in his book How the Mind Works, says, "Our brains were shaped for fitness." He means for survival of the fittest, most adapted to nature, not for truth. Our brains were formed for fitness, not for truth. Not for truth. Sometimes truth is adaptive, but sometimes it is not. This means that, in our evolution from lower creatures, our minds developed to know the truth sometimes to survive, but other times we developed delusions to help us adapt to nature, delusions and falsehoods that remained in our minds to allow us to survive. Dawkins as well confirms this in a joint appearance with Krauss, where they try to convince people that the universe created itself from nothing.
Well, common sense, of course, comes from what was necessary for our brains to survive in the Pleistocene of Africa. So they had to survive. They had to know how to catch a buffalo and how to find a waterhole and how to climb a tree when being pursued by a lion or something. So our brains were never shaped by natural selection to understand either quantum mechanics, the theory of the very small, or relativity, the theory of the very fast. And it's actually an astonishing compliment to the human brain that at least some humans are capable of understanding.
Simply put, Dawkins wants to tell you that if you find his talk about a self-originating universe and other things illogical, it is because your mind developed solely to allow you to survive, like other animals, not to comprehend truth or facts. Therefore, you must trust those with more developed minds than yours, who are capable of understanding the theories that you don't understand, and conclude things that you view as absurd about the universe and life. A promoter of atheism, Matt Dillahunty, was asked how he could trust his mind if he believes it came by chance, without design. Would he trust it because his incidental mind told him to trust it? Listen to the confusion and evasion in his answer, linked in the comments below. Some materialists might say, "These people do not represent me or my views. Even though I am a materialist, I respect and trust the mind." Aha! We refer to their statements because they represent the inevitable result of their materialistic outlook and their denial of a creator who created the mind with absolute wisdom. This is the inescapable consequence of materialism. These materialists simply tried to stay true to their materialistic ideology and ended up invalidating their own minds in the process. When you say, "I, as a materialist, trust my mind and reject what these people say," you are betraying your material principles. Your trust in the mind has no basis in materialism. You were forced to steal it from the system of belief in the Creator. Any self-proclaimed materialist has one of two options. He either adheres to his materialistic principles and reaches the same conclusion, that there is no value to his mind, or he turns his back on materialism so that he can use his mind and trust it. Can you imagine, dear viewers, the impact of what we are saying? Can you believe how baseless and pathetic this materialistic proposition is? When someone starts a conversation with you with no need to talk about a creator, we are discussing science. Ask him, what will be the basis of our discussion? He will say, the mind. Ask him, where did this mind come from if you don't believe it has a creator? He will say, by chance, random mutations and blind natural selection. Ask him, how can you trust such a mind? Your mind, its decisions, its conclusions, its analytical processes, and its interpretations have no value. Why waste time on discussions with such an untrustworthy mind? Even if you accept that a plane could form accidentally without any design, would you be willing to fly on it, knowing that the slightest fault in the manufacture of an aircraft may lead to a crash? Similarly, if the mind developed without design or intention, then it has no value in discovering truth. Thus, materialism, which excludes the all-knowing and all-wise creator from the study of the universe and life, completely demolishes the value and credibility of the mind. Furthermore, it demolishes the value of the deductions, reflections, and analysis which the mind uses to produce science. This alone is sufficient to prove that science can never be described as materialistic, as it relies on the mind, which has no value outside the system of belief in a creator. Accordingly, it is very funny to hear science described as materialistic. Are we done? No. Let's go on to the second source of science, basic axioms, such as causality. In science, the mind analyzes sensory inputs using basic axioms to reach conclusions. You want to know the cause for a certain cancer? Samples are taken from patients with this type of cancer and analyzed for abnormalities. Not all these abnormalities necessarily caused the cancer. Correlation doesn't imply causation, as discussed previously. So what do? You design experiments to introduce each of these abnormalities separately and observe which one causes the cancer. Throughout this process, we rely on our minds. But wait, why assume that cancer has a cause in the first place? Because it is self-evident and necessary. It is a necessary truth which the mind builds upon, similar to mathematical axioms. 1 + 1 = 2. These axioms cannot be proven by the mind. Rather, they are the necessary prerequisites for the function of the mind. Let's think about this. In the system of belief in a creator, basic axioms come from an all-wise, all-knowing creator who gave everything its form and guided it to its function. These axioms are reliable and always true, whether they form part of the mind, instincts, or innate nature. Regardless, they are an essential component in every normal, sane person. In materialism, are such basic axioms trustworthy and reliable? No. They are just beliefs held by a human who came by chance. His belief in these axioms came from chance, random changes, and blind natural selection. Those who say that they are the results of induction from sensory inputs should remember that induction occurs in the mind, which cannot be relied on for truth in materialism. Moreover, induction is usually incomplete. Dawkins, while discussing a universe from nothing, says,
does violate common sense. But as I said earlier this evening, you can't go by common sense. If we could do things by common sense, we wouldn't need physicists.
Likewise, Professor Richard Lewontin claims that adherence to material causes forces scientists to accept claims which are counterintuitive and violate common sense, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. In other words, the idea of a creator must be excluded from science, even if that leads to statements which violate basic truths, as discussed in the episode, The Atheist's God of the Gaps. With such materialistic logic, the door of science is slammed firmly shut, and all questions about cause and mechanism can be answered with, this disease has no cause, this reaction has no mechanism. We have shown in the episode how atheism contradicts mind and science, how the denial of basic axioms leads to the denial of objective truth for anything. Even the phrase scientific fact loses its meaning if necessary truths are rejected. Thus, the second source of science, which is basic axioms, is completely destroyed in materialism and can only exist in the system of belief in a creator. The third source of science is testimony from previous researchers. In the system of belief in a creator, authenticated testimony is a valid source of knowledge. If there is a consensus among previous researchers on a specific result, it makes their collaboration on a lie or mistake highly unlikely, and this result becomes reliable foundational knowledge that can be employed for future scientific discoveries. Wait a minute. Even if the result is true and accurate, why should I rely on it? Isn't it possible to perform the exact same experiment with the exact same parameters and conditions and get a different result? After all, there are no rules, no design, no plan. The answer is no, because the all-wise, all-knowing Creator made the universe follow fixed laws in specific order. Thus, we expect things to behave similarly under similar conditions. This allows us to benefit from previous knowledge and build upon it. It is foolish to question all data and start from scratch before adding any new information. In materialism, only directly tangible results are credible, and any experiments which I do not conduct myself are disregarded. I have to redo the experiments and check the results for myself. Obviously, this is not what goes on in the scientific community. Some important experiments are referenced in thousands of research papers and considered as reliable testimony, despite the fact that only 1, 2, or 3 people may have performed the experiment firsthand. Moreover, in materialism, there is no guarantee of consistency or laws in the universe. Everything is the result of chance, from the smallest physical component to the largest. Thus, your experimental results are meaningless to me. I cannot use them or build upon them, because there is no guarantee that they are reproducible. Reproducibility assumes the existence of laws, order, and patterns which produce consistent outcomes. These are absent in the chance world of materialism. Accordingly, other people's testimony about their experiments and observations is worthless, no matter how trustworthy they are, or how often the same observations are reproduced. There is no place for accumulated knowledge. Citations are meaningless, as are the references listed at the bottom of research papers. You might say, that is not what materialist scientists practice. They do acknowledge the existence of laws and order, Once again, materialism by definition means the absence of design and order. Chance, randomness, and blind selection are the exact opposites of design, law, and order. A materialist who believes in the existence of order and rules is not practicing what he preaches. He is living a contradiction, forced to steal concepts from the system of belief in a creator. We have just shown how materialism cancels the third source of science, testimony, which has no value outside the system of belief in a creator. We are left with the fourth source for science, which is observation. We mentioned earlier that our senses are used to observe things and their effects. Observation interacts with the other sources of science to confirm the existence of things, even if they are not directly observable. If I see a person holding a live wire get electrically shocked and drop dead, I can be certain that there is electricity in that wire, even if I cannot see it. When I see swaying leaves and when I breathe, I deduce the presence of air, even if I do not see it. If there was no air, I would be suffocating. From their effects, we know that the invisible electromagnetic waves used in communications do exist. Heat, atomic particles, and chemical compositions, deduced by the behavior of elements, are not directly observed, but deduced by their effects in reactions and analysis, and many other examples. In the system of belief in a creator, the greatest truth that can be deduced from effects is the creator, whose effects, the universe and life, prove his existence and reveal some of his attributes. You might think that observation is the one problem-free source for science and materialism, especially when we hear that materialism is based on tangible observations. Accordingly, materialism must place great value on observation. Let's see. Materialism has one of two options with regard to observation. The first option is to reject the concept that things can exist through their effects and claim that only what one can directly see, hear, or touch exists. This option invalidates all science that studies physical things through their effects. More importantly, since materialism destroys all other sources of science, observation no longer has any value, as science cannot be produced solely by direct observation. Human beings cannot be reduced to scanning machines or cameras recording images. Humans analyze observations, using their minds in accordance with basic axioms to produce science. The second option is to accept that things can be deduced from their effects, which is the real practice of science. In this case, what is the logical justification to deny that the universe and life are effects which point to the existence of an all-knowing, all-wise creator? Therefore, dear viewers, it is absolutely wrong to describe science as materialistic. In fact, it is a very funny description. There is no such thing as materialistic science, if, by that, we mean science based solely on materialistic sources, which excludes the unseen. Materialism necessarily leads to nihilism because it denies the sources of knowledge. The common factors in scientific research are conclusions, rational analysis, basic axioms as a foundation, observation of causal relationships, adoption of authenticated research testimony, assumptions of order and reproducibility, observations, experimentation, and deducing the existence of things through their effects. All these factors have no value outside the system of belief in a creator which validates the sources of science and provides the framework for their harmonious interaction. Thus, the phrase, "faith and science are mutually exclusive," is a funny phrase, resulting from extreme ignorance as science is the child of faith and cannot exist without it. We often repeat the phrases, "faith does not contradict science," or "faith calls for the practice of science." But the relationship between science and faith runs much deeper. Experimental sciences cannot exist without the sources of knowledge grounded in the system of belief in a creator. Dear viewers, the most important points we proved today are that materialism discredits the mind, science relies on authenticated testimony from previous research, and science is the child of belief in a creator. But how can we claim this when many contemporary scientists are atheists or materialists? You blame materialism for excluding the unseen from the study of the universe and life, yet you want us to answer every scientific question with, "The creator wanted it this way?" Shall we cancel the need to research and explore? It is my hope, dear viewers, that these episodes will spark an intellectual revolution to free us from distorted concepts and false beliefs, and replace them with sound reasoning based on knowledge-based evidence. You will notice at first that they will generate many questions. We will address one idea per episode, and provide step-by-step convincing answers to the questions, if Allah wills. In the next episode, we will start with the first of these questions, so tune in. May the peace and mercy of Allah be upon you.